Today I want to talk about giving up versus changing course after rejection. When I was 18, I had just graduated from high school and was getting ready to take the entrance exams to the English Philology program at the University of Sofia. That was a natural choice for me because I was born in Bulgaria, and so I sat for those exams, but when I learned that I wasn't accepted to the program, I decided to double down on my studies and try again the following year, which I did, and alas, I was rejected again. I was rejected despite the fact that I had the second highest grade on the entrance exam in the country. So when I went to inquire with the dean of the program at the time, like, how is that possible? He mumbled something to the effect that the woman who was accepted in my place had a father who was a member of Politburo. And for my younger audience, Politburo was the policy-making committee of the Socialist Party back then. Well, I didn't have a father who was a member of Politburo, and when I went to complain to my best friend about this, she said, "You should just give up and get a job because it doesn't look like you're going to university." And I was like, "Oh yeah? Watch me." At that point, I had given up applying to the University of Sofia, and I decided to instead take a year off to apply to universities across Europe and the United States. And to be specific, I applied to 138 of them. Yeah, you heard that right. It took a whole year because I had to begin with the research. The educational systems in the UK and Europe are very different from what I was familiar with in Bulgaria. And so I also was applying back when there were no computers. So I had to manually transcribe every address from the Peterson's guide I loaned out of the library at the US Embassy. And then I also had to type my application letters on a typewriter. I had to move out of my parents' flat actually because I was typing until 3 a.m. in the morning and it was driving them crazy because they couldn't go to sleep. So I did rent a room across town in some lady's apartment. I started teaching English as a second language to private students to support paying for the rent, the food, and the postage fees, yes, because we had to mail everything manually. It was not cheap. Today it's a lot cheaper. In any case, a long story short, at the end I was accepted by many universities. Some gave me partial financial support, and there was one that gave me a full ride. And that's significant because coming from a poor country, you cannot afford to put all your eggs in one basket. That's why I applied to 138 universities. But also, you're completely reliant on the full financial support from the university. In other words, it will never be affordable if you didn't have that. And so I got one, and one was all I needed. And so when I accepted that offer, I packed up, I left the family, I moved across the world, and started on a path that led me down to a very productive and very successful career. So in that case, my course correction paid off handsomely. Fast forward 30 years later, something similar happened to me again. It was like deja vu. I was at a university I'd worked for almost 20 years, and I was going up for promotion. I was submitting my application to be promoted to full professor, and I was rejected. I was told to publish more papers and apply again the next year, so I did both. And I was rejected again. And this time I was thinking to myself, I published more twice as much as the last person who got promoted. I had 3 teaching awards, and the only difference was that I was a woman. I was the only woman in the department. And it did look like I was being judged by a different set of criteria. So instead of working harder, publishing more, and trying again for a 3rd time after yet another year, I decided to appeal the department's decision. And it was a very risky move. But I did write a letter stating clearly what I perceived were the faults in their arbitrary assessment of my record. And I submitted it to the provost. And long story short, the provost overturned the department's decision, which, by the way, is a very rare thing. And I was given the promotion to full professor. That, in turn, allowed me to actually apply for the position of dean of the graduate school that same year, which I got. And so if I had decided to wait for another year, I would have missed out on this opportunity. So once again, that change in direction of how I approached the issue really worked out for the better. The moral of the story is that if you're like me, rejection can unleash just the right amount of defiance and stubbornness to find ways to accomplish your goals in a different way. Rejection is not an invitation to give up. It is merely an obstacle. And changing course could end up opening opportunities that are even better than what would have been available to you had you not been rejected. In the words of Bruce Lee, be like water, my friends, and flow around obstacles. Thank you for watching.